that you don't that it is a very critical. It's a signature wound. This and post-traumatic and traumatic brain injury are the most signature wounds of the Iraq and Afghanistan. With that, I've talked enough, so hopefully that sets
Dr.
you up.
Well, let's, you know what, you kind of closed on that point, and so I think it's fitting to transition to Dr. Catherall. Certainly, I mean, you have some experience in that realm, but the same question, though, you know, the value of the veteran on the campus and the meaning of this pledge, if you will.
Okay. I think the main value of this pledge, as I alluded to earlier, is helping the veterans reassimilate into, here the pledge is about this campus, but if they reassimilate into this campus, they're going to reassimilate into American culture and society in general, I think. And that's one of the biggest factors that reduces the amount of PTSD. When I was on this committee, the advisory committee for the VA, and went around looking at units, I was actually asked to go in a couple of times when there was a suicide on one of the VA PTSD units. And the difference between the units I saw where there were suicides and the units where they were having good outcomes were remarkable. And the difference came down to this. The units that were successful, the staff and the veterans felt like they were peers. They were working together. They were one team headed towards the same goal. And the places where there were these suicides, the staff were afraid of the veterans. They would treat them at distance. I went to one place where one of the veterans was discharged, took a cab to a local cemetery, and killed himself right there. And when I interviewed the staff on that unit, they didn't even know what this guy's issues were. They didn't know his experience in the war. They were very distant from it. When I interviewed his colleagues, they said, oh yeah, he used to tell us all this stuff, but he would tell his colleagues this stuff in the bathroom at night because they didn't trust the staff to talk about it in front of the staff. Now that's a very extreme case, and I don't believe there's any units like that these days, but this was a few years back, and it was reflective of the split between viewing veterans as somehow different from everybody else. And when people are viewed as different and treated as though they're different, it makes it 100 times as hard to overcome doing acts and taking actions that are actually at odds with your own deepest basic beliefs in life. Killing people is something that we all grow up learning is a bad thing and not to do that. And yet when we take people and send them to war, whether they kill somebody themselves or just pointing a gun at someone or witnessing this kind of thing, can cause a moral injury to the individual. And the only way that injury is healed is if that individual is able to be embraced by the country and the people that he fought for, or she fought for, especially today that she fought for. And and they're able to make sense of doing something that otherwise doesn't fit. After the Vietnam War, I'm sure you know that a lot of the veterans were spit upon and called baby killers and things like this, so that the things they had to do that are so hard to do in the first place are now disavowed by the rest of the country. And it's only them that did it. So that's when we hung it on the veterans themselves rather than the country that sent these people there to have to take these kinds of actions. And I think this moral injury thing it's different from PTSD, by the way. These are not necessarily individuals who develop PTSD symptoms, but they are people who have to live with something that was at odds with what they believe, and the only way you make sense of that is to have a bigger frame that makes it okay. So when we have moral injuries in our veterans, if we as a culture, and here at Northwestern we are one culture, fail to embrace those individuals, I think that we are injured as well. And I mean the people who are not veterans here on campus, that it has to be something that we can all come together over. Even though what happened in Vietnam is different these days, and everybody has magnets on their cars now proving that they're patriotic, but pardon my cynicism.
Couldn't tell.
Wasn't too well hidden, was it?
Right.
I don't know where I was going with that. Let me look at this again. Okay. We don't have that split as much these days. Veterans are welcomed home, and I've had many people even now who see my license plates and thank me for my service and that kind of thing. Nobody knew I was a veteran in the early 70s. It was just not something that you wanted to reveal to people. But we still have this kind of split going on here. These days it's between the political factions in the country. And to the extent that we have that kind of thing happen on a campus, we are going to disenfranchise those people who have served and had to take these horrendous acts or witness them in order to serve the bigger positive of serving the country. I want to say something else about why I think that, what's the original question? We value them, why they're important to our campus, and what the value of that. And I basically have already stricken out most of the things that I wrote that Rodrigo has been saying, because those are all the same things I thought about, self-sacrifice and whatnot. When you are in the military, you learn to put your own needs below those of the unit and of the whole. It's how you accomplish these things. And I believe that that's a tremendous thing for any kind of society or group, to have people who are able to make that kind of self-sacrifice. My wife and I were waiting for a plane a few years back, and we weren't waiting for the plane, we were waiting for the plane to load. And they let first class in, who were in the front of the plane, so we got to all wait for first class to load and get comfortable. And then they let people go in the plane, and some of them stop at the first two seats with all their luggage, and they're taking up all the things there. And it took half an hour to load this plane. And I'm mumbling and grumbling to my wife. And I said, if this was the Marine Corps, they would have said, okay, line up from the very back to the front. That's how you filled up. Nobody takes anything bigger than this. Get going, and we'd have the whole thing loaded in 4 minutes.
That's right.
And it's kind of nice to have people in your population who know how to do that and say, fine, I don't have to have the front seat, and I don't have to have the big bag. And that's part of what I think veterans bring to this campus and to society in general. They know how to subjugate their needs to the needs of the group. And I feel like we've lost touch with that in our society here, or at least a lot of us have, and I think it's a very valuable thing that veterans can bring to this campus. Okay.
All
That's
right.
my place stop.
Awesome. I'm going to go down to the end of the table, and then I'll come back to you, Professor, Dr. Allen. So you talked about the home front and your focus on the home front, and I think there's some illustrations there about the differences between what the home front was like 40 years ago and what the home front is like now. So I wonder if you could just kind of continue on that thought again with the question in mind.
No, but by all means. I mean, I think the pledge should be seen as a good first step, kind of a way to get a conversation started, and I can't pretend to improve on what Rodrigo said about its intentions and what it could do here, or for that matter, what Don said about how how it can sort of be employed here. But it sort of strikes me that in a way you're talking about a bridge, finding bridges, finding ways that veterans populations can not only feel supported, and the university can find ways to support that population, but also to continue serving, and to kind of find a way for students both to learn from that and to appreciate what it is that veterans bring. And I certainly find in a lot of my classes that students are broadly very well intentioned and earnest and want to know and care, but really don't have very much experience about veterans issues. And I can think of a couple of very small bore ways that maybe the pledge could contribute to sort of more of a connection. One would be to when you think of Northwestern's and President Shapiro's community service mission, couldn't there be a way for student organizations to do more work with veterans outside the campus, for instance, as ways of learning who served and how, and what did it mean, and what can we do to give back, and also how can we all be better connected? I know that might sound a little cheesy, a little Pollyannish, but it seems kind of doable. And again, when you think about this enormous population of veterans and all the people who know veterans and are close to veterans, wouldn't it be great if the people who are not part of that population could take part? Mm-hmm. And then sort of more broadly than that, thinking about the campus. and kind of a certain citizenship education that could be connected to Veterans Affair. I mean, as Don said, we think we're connected to the military and what it means because of the magnets, or because at halftime there's an Iraq vet who's introduced. During the inaugural festivities the other night, President Obama at the Commander-in-Chief Ball was talking to veterans and active duty members of the military, and he started off by saying, well, you all clean up real well. You look good today. But let me tell you that what happens every day, and it happened today when I gave my speech on the Capitol steps, when I mention our soldiers soldiers and military who are serving abroad, that is where I get the biggest cheer. That's great. That's good as far as it goes. But I wonder if there's not a way to draw sort of veterans on campus together with students, either through faculty or through student organizations, to have those conversations, so that a student who doesn't have military experience meeting a veteran won't say, oh wow, who'd you kill? How many people did you kill? And then have nothing left to say, which is not because they're bad people, but because they haven't had that conversation. So
I don't want to interrupt often,
Yeah.
but I do want